You're listening to the Mindset Advantage podcast with Elliot Rowe and Dr. Tricia Gardner.
So, welcome to the show. Quick shout out to our sponsor, BBO Poker Tables. If you want to buy yourself a Christmas present or a Christmas present to someone else, check out bbopokertables.com. And when you call and book them, mention our podcast, the Mindset Advantage podcast, and you get a free gift. So this week we have Eric Crane coming on, long-time professional poker player. He's going to be talking about the highs and lows of his career, and then also talk about his new career in DFS, where he's won some seats to incredible tournaments, millions of dollars, over the next few weekends. So, Tricia, what have you got for us this week?
Hey guys, I'm bringing a little tip, actually a couple of little tips this week on how you can most effectively go after your New Year's resolutions, because that time of the year is coming up quickly. And just as an aside, Elliot and I are putting together a webinar on doing your goals for 2016. That's going to be coming up like December 29th. So stay tuned for more info on that. But in the meanwhile, there's a couple of things I wanted to tell you about how to make your goals more effective. So there's specific things that you can do. So number one, when you're thinking about what it is you want to accomplish, what a lot of people do is they think, oh, I'm going to, make $1 million for the year and it's going to be so easy, or I'm going to win that, bracelet, World Series bracelet, and it'll be so easy. Well, what we find is doing that kind of positive thinking actually hurts you because it squelches motivation. Because if it's going to be easy, why do you need to get motivated, right? So the thing to do is a little something called mental contrasting. And I wrote about this in Positive Poker. And the lady who does a lot of research around it is a lady named Dr. Gabrielle Ettingen. I believe that's how you say her name. She's out of NYU. The idea is that you come up with what it is that you want to do. And then you think, okay, what would be a benefit of me achieving this goal? And so that is kind of positive thinking. But then right after that, you think about, now, what would be an obstacle to reaching this goal? And it actually helps if you write it down. So write down a positive benefit of achieving the goal. And then next, write down an obstacle. And then write another positive and then another obstacle. Now, the reason this works so well is because, yes, we do get a little bit of positivity, which can fire us up. But we see the obstacles and we get a more realistic picture of what it is we need to work on to actually achieve the goal. Do you think that makes a lot of sense, Elliot?
Yeah, definitely. So it's creating like a roadmap to exactly what you need to overcome to reach your success.
Exactly. And a lot of times, when we have some pie in the sky goal, it's more like just a fantasy. And this is a way to, like you said, make a plan, an actual action plan to get it done.
Yeah, excellent stuff. And so get writing down your goals and your obstacles out there.
That's right.
So let's give Eric a call. So Eric, thanks for coming on the show. If you could introduce yourself to our listeners.
Hi, Elliot. Hi, Tricia. It's good to be here. My name's Eric Crane. I've been a professional poker player for about 10 years. You might have seen me a long, long time ago in the U.S. Poker Championships back when I was just a wee little boy when I was 21 and 22. And now I'm still doing that 10 years later. Had some big wins, I've had some big losses, a lot of swings, a lot of crazy times, and it's all calmed down now. So yeah, that's about it.
Awesome. So if you could talk to us about some of those wins and some of those swings, what sort of things have you seen in your career?
Yeah, when I was 21, I was winning a lot playing 1,000, 2,000 Omaha high-low. Then I was winning a lot, and then I kind of switched some other games that I didn't know nearly as well, and I lost all that money, and it's kind of, it's been very swingy ever since. Then a few years ago, I had some pretty big wins on PokerStars. I won a W Coup. I had a piece of a guy who had another big W Coup score, and that was the same day he got second in the main event, and the same day I won mine. Yeah, and then I kind of blew up again and lost a lot again, and it's been a very very swingy career. But, lately, the last couple of years, I've kind of slowed down a little bit, and I'm not playing nearly as big as I used to, and it's been a lot better.
I kind of wonder for people who are listening who maybe haven't had such dramatic highs and lows, do you have any sort of advice on how to handle the emotions that go with those big swings?
Besides working with Elliot? No, it was something I struggled with a lot, where just, I don't think anybody, especially in their early 20s, is prepared to have that kind of money. And, I was basically broke, just a normal pro poker player, and I went on a big rush, and next thing I know, I had $1 million in the bank, and I go, oh, well, this was fun. And then, next thing I know, I didn't. How I handled it at the time, I didn't handle it very well. And now it's just kind of like, I've stepped down a lot. I don't really play high stakes anymore. Man, handling that stuff is tough, though. It's really difficult. Like if you don't have a good support system there, whether it's working with somebody like Elliot or whether it's, just having family and friends who are there to slap you upside the head and, treat you normal, whether you're getting your ass beat or whether you're winning all the money, that's actually helps a lot, just having the support system there.
And out of interest, is there anything that really surprised you with it when you had those big wins? Is there anything that really shocked you in the way that people behaved or the way that you were dealing with the wealth?
Oh, sure. I mean, it was, I don't think I did anything too extravagant. When I was 21, I bought a car. This last time I bought a Rolex, and I own neither of those things now. So I guess that should tell you something. But as far as the way people treated me, like the people who have known me for a long time, they know, kind of, oh, how's Eric doing? They'll ask another friend, oh, he's either winning a lot or losing a lot. That's just how it is. So there have been a lot of the people that I've known throughout the years that have stuck are people that don't really care, but it's always an interesting story. And I always, if I'll go see people I haven't seen in a while, they're wanting to hear all these stories. But, for the most part, people have not treated me that different, to be honest. I'm still the short, chubby, happy guy who likes to gamble.
What I wonder about is, now, of course, you're more mature and you can look back on it with some sense of, balance. What would the Eric of today, what would your advice be to the younger Eric if you were in such a situation to do that?
I think what I didn't realize back then is that it wasn't going to last. When you're 21 and you're winning, 30, 50, 100,000 a day, or you're losing that much, you think, well, this is just how it's always going to be. And I'm going to get better, and therefore I'm just going to win all the money. I remember being 21 thinking, man, I'm going to win $20 million a year playing this thing. This is going to be great. And you just don't, unless you have a very sound understanding of how the poker economy works, you're kind of clueless. And when I was 21, I mean, I always say now I'm the dumbest guy in almost every room I'm in, but boy, back then it was really true. I just had no clue. So I guess what I would tell myself is that A, it's not going to last, and B, you've got to learn how to respect the money, because if you don't, you're going to go broke every time.
Yeah, I think that is really powerful advice right there in a nutshell.
And I mean, as one of the guys who's been around the poker industry for that length of time, how have you seen the games change over those years?
Oh, it's so much harder now than it used to be. It's unbelievable. I think people, I'm 31, people my age always say, oh, you don't understand how good it was back in the mid 2000s. And it always kind of sounds like hyperbole, and it's just not. I mean, it was printing money. Back then you could, you'd find a 9-handed game and 8 of the people were terrible, and the sites would actually pay you, things would look up. And whereas now it's really hard to be a professional poker player now. I cannot imagine being 20 or 21 or 22 and just trying to start out now and make it in poker. It's so hard. When I'm in the US, which is, God, most of the time now, I'll play on the US sites, and they're not super soft compared to what they used to be, but they're not super difficult. And then I'll go up to Canada and I'll play on Stars or something. And I'm just like, oh my God, everybody's good. It's unbelievable. And I think, a lot of people, I'll have friends ask me now, man, I hope Poker Stars comes back to the US. Boy, those games were great. And I said, yeah, they were great 10 years ago. That's not the case anymore. Those games don't exist anymore. It's really hard to be a pro poker player now. It really is.
Out of interest, would you prefer to see, if Poker Stars did come to America, would you prefer it to be only American Poker Stars? So you're only playing within the American pool, or would you rather it came back as the whole worldwide site again?
I guess from a greedy standpoint, I'd rather it be the American pool. There's something to be said for the Americans haven't really been playing online poker at a high level for 4 years now?
Yeah.
4 or 5 years now? So, they don't have that practice where they're playing online every day, where they're playing 20 tables of tournaments every day. So I would imagine if it was just the Americans, it would be so soft.
Now, what about if we do have many listeners who are, 20, 22, 23, and so they're going to hear you and they're going to go, well, is he just telling us not to do it? So what can they do if they do want to be a professional poker player to most enhance, their chances of being a success?
I think you get a lot of the kids now, and they work so much harder than I ever had to. I'll talk to people on Skype, and they say, oh, yeah, I'm like, what are you doing? Oh, I've been studying for 5 hours. And I say, you've been what? For guys who are growing up my age, I never studied. Elliot's mentioned me before, oh, do you review hand histories? And I said, what the hell do you mean review hand histories? I don't even understand.
Yeah, he's on the naughty step a lot with me.
Yeah. On the naughty list, that's for sure. Now that Christmas is coming up and they get colds, and it's just going to be ugly. But no, I mean, it's one of those things where it's so competitive now. If you're not willing to work harder than the next guy, and if you're not willing to put in those hours, I don't see a way. I find it very difficult to believe that somebody could make it who wasn't willing to work harder than everybody else. So it's like any other industry. It becomes more competitive, and it becomes a matter of who's willing to work the hardest.
Along those same lines, I want to ask you about the mental game particularly, because I've been having a discussion in one of the forums that I belong to, and the discussion is around when in a poker player's career does it make the most sense for them to start getting, mental game coaching, or to really be thinking about their mental game?
Immediately. There's no question about that. I've mentioned Elliot a number of times. I wonder how much money I would have if I started working with him 10 years ago rather than, a year and a half ago?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, we've done a while.
Yeah. So, you're always going to need mental game for something. When you're starting out, you're going to need it just to handle the tilt. What game should I play? There's just a lot of decisions you make as a beginner. And then as you get older, as you get more experience, you're making other decisions. And it's important to have that mental balance, because if you don't, you're going to be making mistakes. And yes, you're still going to make mistakes when you're doing this stuff, but it's a lot easier to have that mental training background when those mistakes are happening, just to minimize the negative effect it has.
The other thing I have noticed as well is I can always tell what level a person is at in their development in the game by what their attitude is towards the mental game. I don't know. Have you noticed anything like that?
I mean, I see... I don't play live as much as I used to. I used to travel the circuit a lot, but you can definitely see guys who, let's say I see a guy who has a big win, okay? And he's sitting there and his chest is out and I'm the best in the world, throwing the hands around. And I always, look at a buddy and I go, oh, he'll be broke in 3 months. Oh, that's going to be a tough story. Oh, God. And it happens every time. My story, I don't think as many people talk about it, where, the people run up these huge bankrolls and go broke, I think, because it's embarrassing for a lot of people. I've been doing it for a third of my life. I'm used to it. So, I think it's very common, though. There used to be an old saying that nobody holds on to their first bankroll. And nobody really talks about it, but it's so hard to hold on to that first bankroll if you don't have a solid foundation.
And do you think that's an ego thing, that when people start winning, they start thinking, well, I'm a winner now, I should be in a higher stakes, until they reach a stake where they lose? Do you think it's that?
Yeah, it's absolutely. Yeah, I always say I'm the king of the Peter principle, because, I've always moved up to right where I start getting my butt kicked. Yeah, it's... people, they win and they go, well, I'm the best. And, you have people around you. Oh, you're so great. Oh, you're playing great. Oh, this play was sick. Or, and all this other stuff. And they go, oh, well, I must be the best. I'm just going to keep moving up. And then, oh, shit, I'm broke. So, yeah. But is it an ego thing? Yeah, it's an ego thing. Yeah, I mean, enough people tell you you're the best, you're going to start to believe it. And you got to get to the point where you've got a solid enough recognition of yourself. And I think that's really hard when you're in your early 20s to kind of know who you are. And as you get older and more mature in poker, you will learn who you are and you will learn kind of your place. Everybody has their place in poker. Mine wasn't playing high stakes. Mine was grinding a lot of heads up Omaha high-low, a lot of tournaments online, though I hated the tournaments. I was good at them and I won at them. So I felt the need to keep playing them, but I hated it. But everybody's got to kind of find their place. And as soon as a player learns his place in poker and accepts that that's his place, life becomes a lot easier.
Another thing I've noticed is that a lot of people feel like, oh, if you quote unquote need a mental game coach, there's something wrong with you, almost like it's a negative, but it doesn't really sound like that's what your attitude is or that's what your experience has been.
I would say for 99.99% of people, a mental coach would be a positive in your life. I'm sure there are people out there who they've got it all figured out and they don't need a mental game coach. I'm not one of them, and most of my friends aren't one of them. So, for me, it was just kind of like I had a buddy say, this really helped me with some tilt issues, and I was having kind of a downtime. But I was prone to tilting. I was prone to, okay, well, I lost this. I'll move up, and I'll move up. And all of a sudden I was moving up the street because I couldn't afford my rent. So, and so it was just kind of one of those things where you got to learn your place. You really do.
And that's so hard for so many players to accept.
Oh, yeah, because there's a certain cachet that comes with being a pro poker player, saying, well, I don't have to work. I don't have to go to the 9 to 5. And there is a certain ego that comes with that. It's probably a little bit less prevalent now than it used to be, because I think the younger guys who are winning now, they do treat it like a full-time job a lot of the time. They almost do treat it like a 9 to 5 work, because if they don't, they are going to go broke.
Hey, Eric, it's not 9 to 5, it's an 8 to 8.
It's 12 hours, exactly. So, people always said, poker is a tough way to make an easy living. And I think that's even more true now. I think it's a really tough industry right now. I really do.
And a great segue there, because one of the reasons we wanted to have you on today is this switch into DFS and the success you've been having since you made that switch. So if you can explain to our listeners who might not know what DFS is and just talk them through that and then talk about what's been going on over the last few weeks.
Yeah, sure. The DFS is Daily Fantasy Sports, and that's basically where you are, you're picking players every day. Every player has their own salary cap and their own salary number, and you have a total salary you're allowed to play for every day, for every game. And they have they have tournaments as cheap as a quarter to as high as 10 grand. And so over the I've been playing it seriously for probably about a year and a half now. And I genuinely really enjoy it. I always say I was the kid who he would buy the sports video games as a kid, but I wouldn't play the games. I would just build the rosters and then simulate the games. And then, okay, well, now I want to build another team. So for a guy like me who enjoys doing that, it's a perfect thing. The learning curve is high. People tend to be very arrogant about their sports knowledge, even more so than their poker. People always think they're good at 2 things, sex and poker. And I always think now they're good at 3 things, sex, sports, and poker. So everybody gets on these sites and they go, well, I think
I'm not good at poker. All right.
Well, people get on these sites and they say, well, I know sports, I'm going to be great at this. And what I've realized, I think what I've learned is that nobody knows anything about sports unless you really dive into the numbers and the math and and the projections and the projection models to do all this stuff. I started winning at Daily Fantasy once I accepted that I was an idiot.
That's the secret to life, right?
Yeah, exactly. As soon as you realize you know nothing, people always say, I want to be, if I'm the smartest guy in the room, I'm in the wrong room. And I feel really strongly about that. I mean, I'll sit around with friends, like my poker friends, and I am very clearly the dumbest guy in the room. I mean, that is so obvious that I'm the dumbest guy in the room. But I accept that, and so I try and learn, and I don't try and be a hero. I just kind of try and not do anything too stupid, and yeah, it worked. And that's kind of what I've done with fantasy, where I wake up and I study the numbers. I have a few different projection models that I use, and I pretty much average them out, and I've got a pretty solid understanding of game theory. And yeah, that's what I do every day now. That's, I guess for the first time in 10 years, I'm not necessarily a pro poker player, but I've pivoted on to Daily Fantasy full time.
You're at least a hybrid, right?
Yeah.
I want to ask you, I don't know that much about the Daily Fantasy Sports world. So are there books, videos, computer programs like there are in the poker world that you can study?
Sure. There are a few books out there. There's one by John Bales that I read every year that I find very helpful for baseball. There's a website that I use primarily for advice, and that's great for beginners, RotoGrinders. And man, they are very helpful. Just what their forums, you get a lot of very big winning players who go in there and they kind of give advice, and it's a very helpful community. And then there are projection models that I subscribe to. There are some free ones, and then there are some ones that I pay for. Obviously, I think the ones that you pay for are better. You get what you pay for.
Right.
So I use multiple projection models for my stuff. And then I use my own hard work. For football, I use Pro Football Focus, which does a hell of a good job of breaking down stuff. I use a few other football sites though, and for NBA, I use the projection models mainly. And then I use I use my own knowledge game theory to figure out who I should be playing on a given night.
And if you can talk us through the last 10 days or so, Eric, because you've had me watching football, which I don't usually get around to doing, sweating, not who's going to win, but if players will catch the ball. So if you can talk everyone through this.
Well, okay, so I didn't have a lot in my FanDuel account. Here, I'll just give you the full story. I guess it was about a week ago, I didn't have a whole lot in my FanDuel account, and there was a very specific spot that I loved for the short slate, which is only a 3-game, there are only 3 games going on at the time. But there is a very specific spot. Marshawn Lynch, who's the starting running back for the Seahawks, was out. And it was late news, so everybody had kind of had their lineups built. So then all of a sudden I realized that, okay, well now Thomas Rawls, who is the backup, is going to play, is in a great spot. And because most people are lazy, they're not going to switch to him. So on FanDuel, I entered all the short slate stuffs, $25 and under, and I won all of them. And I entered, I think, 12 different lineups. And I think 8 of my lineups were in the top 30 out of about 3,000 people, including first place, second, 7th, and 8th, and a couple other top 20s. So then I did that. And, I've been, as people can understand now, I tend to go on big rushes. So I pushed. And so next thing I know, I started winning DraftKings. I won the $300 NBA in the same night, but I won the one on FanDuel and the one on DraftKings, which was about $25,000 for one and $30,000 on the other. And then
you pushed again.
Then I kept pushing. Yada, yada, yada. This weekend, I've got a seat in the $100,000 buy-in on FanDuel, which is a live final in San Diego. And there's 120 people in that. I'm guaranteed $20,000 for last place. First place is $3 million. So I will be leaving on Friday for that in San Diego. And then I also won 2 seats for the DraftKings live final, which is an $80,000 buy-in. And first place in that is $5 million, and last place is $20,000. So, and that is the following week in San Diego. So Friday I leave for San Diego, and I will be Sunday crossing my fingers, hoping that whoever the hell I need to catch a football catches a football. And then I'm going to stay in San Diego, and the next week I'll be doing the same thing. It's pretty surreal considering that I was playing a lot of fantasy cash games. I was doing well, but I wasn't, obviously winning all this money. And now all of a sudden in the last week and a half, I've gone from, okay, I'm doing this daily fantasy full time. I'm making enough, but I'm not making heaps, to all of a sudden making heaps.
And that's literally just sort of, for people who don't understand in terms of these tickets, you've won $260,000 worth of MTT tickets in 10 days.
Yeah, exactly. And the absolute bare minimum downside is 60,000 cash, and the upside is over 8 million in cash.
Now, this begs the question, okay? So we know that you are going to come into some amount of money, and it could even be a very large amount of money.
Yes.
And now you're older and wiser. So let's assume everything runs marvelously, perfectly. You get a 7-figure score. What will you do with it this time that might have been different from, 10 years ago when you got a 7-figure score?
Well, I'm supposed to just go play the $1 million buy-in at the World Series, right? Aren't we just going for the super parlay here? No. Obviously, I'm kidding. I just had like an hour discussion with my wife about this. If something happens where I do run hot and I hit some giant score, most of it's going to be put back. I don't require anymore an expensive lifestyle. I don't need nice cars, nice watches, nice whatever. I've got my 70-inch TV that works fine, and my couch works just fine. I don't require. I'll travel more. I will certainly do that. You might see me at the Aussie Millions. I went to the Australia Millions about 5 years ago, and it was the most fun trip of my life. So I might splurge on that, but you're not going to see me in like high stakes poker games anymore. You're not going to see me. I've kind of moved on from that. I don't have a desire. I don't have this ego anymore that needs to be fed, that needs to say, okay, now I have to prove that I can beat the biggest stakes in the world, which happened to me multiple times before. I don't have that need in my life anymore. I'm perfectly content just kind of putting the money back, being smart with it, and sort of relaxing, And
how does it feel to see that evolution that, you've got this, again, I mean, you've won millions in the past, you've been given another shot at it, but this time you actually know what to do and know how to deal with it.
Yeah, I just hope I run good in the $1 million buy-in, basically. No, it feels really nice. It's nice to not have the need to feed that ego anymore. It's nice to not have the need to feel like I have stuff to prove, because I don't. And I think a lot of, when you're in your early 20s, you're trying to prove yourself to the world, and that's just sort of the way it is. That's sort of the natural progression of life. And anymore, I just don't have that need or desire, and that's a really nice feeling. It's good to know that if I were to win $1 million, probably 90% of it would go back.
Isn't it just amazing for you to get this do-over in a sense? It's like a financial do-over. How many people get that?
Do-overs. Yeah, no, I'm really lucky. Like I really am. I know, Elliot, you and I have talked about this before. I have, for whatever reason, I have been lucky enough to get so many second chances and third chances, just with the chance to have these big scores. It's very surreal, and sometimes I feel guilty about it even because it makes no sense because I don't do anything special except for when I'm broke, I work harder. So I guess since I've been not broke, but I've been short on cash for the last however many years. Okay, now I've been working harder, and I guess that's part of the payoff. But at the same time, under no circumstance should anybody get as many chances that I have for a big score. But I sure am glad that I do.
And I mean, it's going to be quite the trip as well in terms of doing the live final there. How does it work from that side? I mean, are the scores going to be up somewhere? Is it going to be watchable? What are they doing?
Yeah, I mean, you'll be able to follow on both FanDuel for next weekend and then DraftKings the weekend after that. They will have, their Twitter accounts will be live updating, and then you'll also be able just to watch the contest on your computer. It's pretty simple to follow. It's a website, so they make it pretty interactive and pretty fun. And obviously, I'll be sitting there at a watch party somewhere with no fingernails just because I'll be so nervous.
What I'm wondering, so DFS, it goes on year round all the time?
Yeah, I mean,
okay.
Any sport, football is the biggest. And after that, it's basketball. So right around October till February is prime time to be doing this. And, I got to remember that last year, once football ended, basketball got a lot tougher. So because all the, people put their money on to play fantasy football, well, and football only runs Saturday and Sunday. So then Tuesday through Saturday, they're bored. So they come play, well, I'll try fantasy basketball or I'll try fantasy hockey. Or, they have fantasy MMA. They have fantasy soccer. I mean, they even have fantasy NASCAR, which I've tried before, and I don't understand anything about NASCAR. I figure I get a point every time they go in a circle, but I don't really understand how it works. So, yeah. But, yeah, no, they have fantasy for just about every sport. They have fantasy. I won a fantasy golf tournament 2 days ago, which, let's be honest, I probably shouldn't have been in, but I was, and I won. So, go team.
Our gentle readers, our gentle listeners may not know this, but my mother is probably one of the world's biggest NBA fans. So now I'm kind of seeing a way that maybe I can tap into her well of knowledge.
It's like I said, if you want to win at this, you got to accept that you don't know anything.
Well, believe me, I know that I know nothing, but she knows a little something about it. So maybe she can help a girl out.
I remember I was looking at a guy who's a professional DFS player's Twitter account. This was maybe 6 months ago. And the tagline was, never watch sports, don't know anything about sports, professional fantasy sports player. and I always think that might be almost the best guy to do it because there's
no emotion.
There's no emotion. There's, no, this guy screwed my team in the 86 finals, so I'm not going to play him or anything like that. I guess if somebody was playing basketball in 1986, you wouldn't want to play him anyways, but
he's now managing another team.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't want to play that guy, that's for sure. But yeah, there's no and it's tough to keep that emotion in check sometimes. I've got a couple guys who I talk to hours and hours a day on Skype just about this player. And, I'm not playing this guy. Oh, I can't do that. And then you realize that you almost have to play that guy because he screwed everybody else. So nobody else is going to play him. So all of a sudden you gain an edge if he goes off because he's only going to be on 5% of rosters. So you go from, I'm never playing this guy again, he sucks, to, oh no, now I have to play this guy because everybody else thinks he sucks and nobody's going to roster him again.
Man, and while we're talking about the sort of the mental side as well, switching back to the poker, we always like to ask guys who come on, what's the worst tilt, the best story of tilt they've seen in their careers? And you've been around the tables for a long time. What do you remember as the most extreme example of somebody blowing up at the tables?
Oh my God, do I have to pick one?
Well, you can give us two if you want.
I mean, there was one time with me where I had my computer tower and I lost an online poker, and I took the tower very calmly. I unplugged everything, and I took it in the bathroom and I set it under the bathtub and let water run all over it, so it wouldn't be a computer anymore. And I'm not making that up. I was probably there's a picture on my Twitter of just the computer tower in a bathtub with water running over it. So
what I like is you say you were very calm as you placed it in the bathtub. That's the best part.
Yeah, I'm sure I was in some sort of awful manic, state where had somebody, not put pickles on my burger where I didn't want it, I would have stabbed them. But luckily, I just took it out on the computer tower. So there was that.
And live, what have you seen in the live tables?
Oh man. I saw a guy one time throw a chair and scream at this elderly man, "I'm rich because of effers like you." That was something. A guy got a penalty 1 year for throwing cards at me, but that's not really that bad a tilt. I mean, considering what the other stuff I've seen. Oh man, I'm going to get off this podcast and remember something great. I know. but and I've had holes in my doors. I had a picture once where I had a computer chair hanging out of my door from where I threw it. I was a loon.
Hey man, don't worry, we got there.
Yeah, we're a lot better now. Yeah, the holes are smaller. I tend to sit in the computer chairs rather than throw them. So life's good.
Well, Matt, thank you so much for coming on the show. How can people follow your DFS quest?
You can follow me on Twitter at Eric Crane, ERICCRAIN, where I will either be tweeting really happy things, really angry things, really funny things, or things that aren't funny at all that I find funny.
Awesome.
So follow at Eric Crane on Twitter. Definitely recommend it.
Something
Thanks,
for
Elena.
everyone.
Yeah. I mean, it's the crazy swings.
Hey man, well, good luck. Have a great time on those trips and make us all proud. Get the millions, sir.
Oh, I hope so. Thanks, Ellie. I really appreciate everything.
Hey man, thanks for coming on the show.
All right, anytime.
Cheers, man. Bye.
Bye.
Great to have Eric on the show. He's always a ton of fun.
Oh my God, he is so fun, and he has such a good, outlook, and you can really tell this guy has lived and been in the game and just been around the block a few times.
Yeah, he's got some stories, that's for sure.
That is for sure.
And it's going to be a lot of fun following him through the DFS over the next few weeks. I really do recommend, if you're out there, checking him out on Twitter. His Twitter's funny anyway, but I can only imagine how amusing the next few weeks of these live multi-million-dollar tournaments with only a few hundred people in will be.
But there's more to him than just like that fun side, because I was taking a few notes, as he was talking, because A, I want to look into the DFS stuff, but B, he said a couple things that I thought, this is really where it's at, about understanding, where your place is and accepting it. I thought that was super good advice.
Oh, completely. And also, as obviously it's all in good humor and things, and he's saying, I don't know how I keep getting so lucky. The reason he's getting so lucky is the positions he's putting himself in. He's not going into DFS just randomly putting together teams here. He's actually taking it very seriously, and it's paid off.
Yeah, I mean, he talked about practicing every day. He talked about working hard. He talked about, studying really hard. And I did think it was interesting that he mentioned specifically on DFS that the learning curve is really high, because I think a lot of people are like, it's just a little fun. And they don't really realize maybe that there is such a big learning curve if you want to win a lot of money.
Yeah, I mean, it's another one. It's another poker. You need to know what you're doing. And it's in the early days, just as poker once was. So, Trisha, where can people find out about you and your services?
Go ahead and come and visit me at my website, drtrishakardner.com. It's coming along as we speak. And you can also follow me on Twitter at Dr. Trisha Kardner.
And I'm on pokermindset.com, mindcoach.com, crikey, pokermindcoach.com, one of those days. And there'll be news out soon regarding our webinar on goal setting that's going to be, as Trisha said, on Tuesday the 29th. So we look forward to talking to you soon, and we'll be back again next week.
Bye, guys.
You've been listening to the Mindset Advantage podcast with Elliot Rowe and Dr. Trisha Kardner. To get any resources mentioned in the episode or to listen to past shows, visit pokermindcoach.com/TMA podcast. Thanks for listening.